Ready. Ready. Ready.
Hello, welcome to Enlightning. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to learn about Meshery with Lee. Lee, will you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, yes. Hey, Lee Calcote. I'm here in Austin, Texas with Whitney, actually.
Yeah.
Here.
High five.
Oh, no. Okay. Can we have like a redo? Oh, good.
Yeah.
And outside of not being high five capable, I spend a lot of time with Meshery, and so that's today's topic. Great. I work at Layer 5. I am a CNCF ambassador like Whitney is, and so we talk nerd stuff quite a bit with that hat on. I'm a Docker captain. Authored a couple of O'Reilly books on cloud native stuff, and I spend time as a CNCF technical advisory group chair. There's one focused on networking, and so I hang out there. But just a nerd, I suppose, is sort of what it comes down to.
Welcome. And I should say, introduce myself too. My name's Whitney. I'm a CNCF ambassador like Lee. My name's Whitney Lee, and we share a name. And I'm a developer advocate at VMware Tanzu, and I don't know anything about Meshery. I know almost nothing. So if you also know almost nothing, you're in the right place. We're going to go from 0 to, I don't know, maybe 80, 35, somewhere. 0 to at least 1 to knowing about Meshery.
To hero, yeah.
Yeah, it does rhyme. I would like to say hi to some folks in chat. We have lots of new friends here today. Hello, lots of LinkedIn friends, which I don't usually have tons of LinkedIn friends. So I want to give you all a shout out. Thank you so much for being here, for saying hi in the chat. And those of you who do chat from any platform, we can see you and we will answer your questions. And it's going to be a fun stream. So let's do this thing. So Lee, I would like to start by, since I know absolutely nothing about Meshery, instead of you telling me about Meshery, what I first want to hear is the problem space. Like what problems were happening that caused Meshery to get created?
Finger pointing, I suppose. Okay, all right. And that is to say that, well, I don't know if, for those of us who've been in various engineering teams, they don't always necessarily get along with one another, or sometimes it's the network guys it's their fault, or, well, first of all, it's always the network. Let's just agree on that. But sometimes there's a lot of confusion or misunderstandings between various engineering teams or various product teams. And sometimes that's not necessarily born of ill will towards one another, but it's born of not being on the same page or not having the same understanding. And so so there's that's rampant. Well before Meshery, and as Meshery gets adopted, hopefully there's less finger pointing, more common understanding. Part of the problem space and part of the reason that people aren't always on the same page is because for any enterprise, infrastructure diversity is a real thing. I mean, there's, depending upon the size of the organization, there is, so you're at Broadcom, formerly VMware. There are VMs probably running around in that place, and there are probably, maybe there's only VMware VMs running around, but maybe there's other types of VMs or other types of hypervisors. I know that would be heresy to suggest, but potentially so. And so Meshery is a piece of management. Well, we're going to get to kind of what it is, I suppose, in a moment, but it can be difficult, clearly, for people to administer, have uptime, do configuration management, do lifecycle management of a variety of infrastructure. And the more variety, probably the harder that is. So Meshery comes into, well, I'm trying not to say what Meshery is.
So what I'm hearing with the problem space is there's a wild amount of complexity in modern systems, and then various teams to manage different aspects of that complexity. And then when something goes wrong, it's hard to know how or why or at what point in the system. And then we have the teams all blaming each other.
Yeah, it's even hard to know. It's hard to know, like, when something does go wrong, who's working on it now, and what are they doing about it now? And is there a shared whiteboard, actually, a shared lightboard for, and like, yeah, so a picture is worth 1,000 words. Often when we're dealing with infrastructure, like, what was the world like before Meshery? What was the problem? It was YAML. It was, or fine, could be JSON, but it's like, and whether you're like trying to architect or design new infrastructure and its configuration, if you're staring at like a blank VS Code or choose your IDE, if you're staring at a blank screen trying to like type out that YAML from what, it's like, that's quite challenging. If you're, I've spent maybe more time than I should with Istio, just as a random example of one of the cloud native projects. It's, if you're running Istio and you want to take a look at its configuration, well, this isn't Istio's a great project, but get out your mouse wheel. You're going to be scrolling through the config forever.
Yeah.
Trying to comprehend that, like, it's a problem. It's a challenge. Like, trying to mentally visualize those virtual networks and the powerful like routing that something like Istio will do is like. Those of
y'all in the chat, can you relate to what he's describing? Are these? I'm just curious about like what your input is into something personally you've gone through related to this stuff. So with this, we have no common understanding about infrastructure or even the layers on top of infrastructure like Istio, about networking. And so there's no common understanding. There might be niche knowledge here and there, but what do we go if we want to integrate to different things? Like, just, so we're talking about blaming, but it doesn't have to be blaming. It has to be like, maybe we want to work together, but we don't know together what we don't know. And it becomes, with the wild amount of complexity that exists in cloud native systems today, it's hard to keep track of it all.
Yeah, part of that problem that people have, if I could add this, is that to your point about, I think you just said the word landscape, maybe, and so there's like, just in the CNCF proper landscape, so to speak, it's often, it's an impressively intriguing thing, and therein lies a challenge for many people to digest that and understand how to navigate it and which tools to use and which ones not to use and what's best for their environment. Just like a problem of trying those things out, putting their hands on any of the projects quite quickly. Some of the projects have a playground, and many of them don't. And so that's I keep struggling not to say what Meshery is, but That's a problem for people to understand and navigate that landscape, to quickly learn, quickly explore, and try these various, well, cloud native and also cloud. We might talk about how Meshery touches up against some public clouds as well.
Cool. So I think it's time for the Meshery is fill in the blank.
It is a self-service and extensible engineering platform. So self-service extensible engineering platform. So it is a piece of management software. Let me clarify that term if I can, even if we just agree on it for this session, this episode, which I'll say it like this, that many of us there's various terms that people are familiar with, maybe a data plane, maybe a control plane, maybe a management plane. This is sort of one way of characterizing where Meshery lands in this echelon of infrastructure. So there are like infrastructure elements. Actually, if we use VMware as an example, it's just like, hey, you might have an infrastructure element as a VM. Great. There's vCenter and a bunch of 62 other products or 89 other products that at VMware that help manage those VMs, because there's a lot of sprawl. And so there's vCenter, and it helps you manage the VM. Great. And so in that sense, that vCenter orchestrator is it's a control plane, like the data plane where things actually happen and compute works and your apps run as these VMs. And there's a purpose-built piece of software, vCenter, that orchestrates and knows every aspect of VMware VMs and ESXi and all the and that's not, Meshery is not here to replace vCenter. It's here to augment and extend vCenter, to sit on top of that control plane. So it's not here to, if you were to consider that, if we made another quick analogy, that is, hey, there's a bunch of these containers running around. Kubernetes is something of an orchestrator, a scheduler of containers, making sure that they're up and running. And so Meshery that's something of a control plane. You've got these infrastructure elements, and then you've got this, and those are the things that are doing the compute, the containers that are running they're the data plane. There's this control plane, Kubernetes, orchestrate, Meshery to extend it and provide an experience. That's probably one of the things I should say, is that Meshery provides an integrated experience. It's trying to, answer these problems that we've articulated here about.
Would you say it's a control plane for control planes?
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, it's another analogy would be to use an organizational hierarchy is that there are individual contributors. There are managers who are responsible for 6 or more individual contributors. Hopefully no, right around that number. And then there are directors who are probably responsible for managers. And so Meshery is more of a director level piece of software. Yeah.
My son and I joined the corporate landscape at the same time, which is actually pretty recent. And we like to refer to our managers as our parents and our teammates as our siblings. And we can say somebody's an aunt or a grandparent as a way to help communicate about org structure. But we have a question. Thank you for asking a question. It's regarding finger pointing between teams. What does Meshery do that monitoring tools like Datadog and Prometheus miss?
Yep. Good question. So regarding finger pointing, it might be the case that you're using, it is the case that you're using either of those two tools, Datadog and Prometheus, for observability. Prometheus specifically for metrics, Datadog for like all the types of observability. And when are you using those tools? Well, sometimes proactively, or hopefully proactively. You're going in there, you're setting up your dashboards, and you're watching, you're looking over your infrastructure, making sure it's healthy. And then there's a moment in which things aren't healthy. There's an alarm that fires, a rule that triggers, that beeps your proverbial pager, and you can use Prometheus to look at like look at the moment in time in which that metric went south, in which that CPU spiked. And you might be looking at, like if we just use CPU as an example, you might be saying, hey, looks like the application is consuming entirely too much CPU. And the application developer might in turn turn to the infrastructure engineer and saying, I don't think so. That's another process that you've sidecarred or that you've included, and it's consuming that. And you get this finger, no, it's your fault and it's my fault and it's your, as an example. Now, from Datadog, if a representative was here, they would say, well, actually, Lee, Datadog helps facilitate for the, like helping solve that, because we'll give you a metric specifically for the application layer items, and then other metrics for like the hosts, the servers that those are running on. And so you can clearly tell it's the network that's slow. And then so they help resolve some of that finger pointing as well. Okay, great. So yeah, so how does Meshery? Well, all right, so we're looking at a Lightboard right now. The Meshery, how do I say this concisely?
Based on what you've told me, just in the short time, it sounds like Prometheus is like you can see the problems. Maybe with Datadog, you can even see exactly where it is, but there's nothing you can do about it from that plane. Like you use one plane to figure out what the problem is, and you have to go somewhere else to fix the problem.
Yeah.
It seems like Meshery is like a centralized place where you can see problems, but also manipulate to what's in front of you. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And that's much better. Yeah. If there was a Datadog representative, or if there's other nerds here who are saying, wow, wait a sec, Datadog, you can like, to add to that, because there's some like Datadog is capable of doing and helping you manage and manipulate some of the infrastructure to help rectify the issue. And now they have automated remediation in Datadog, maybe in Datadog. Okay, what I'm trying to say is, so for Meshery, like it has the ability through its extensions to visualize your infrastructure. So you can very quickly look and see what else is going on. And you can very quickly look and see that either the network engineer is actively looking at the infrastructure, or they're not even looking at the problem. It's a collaborative interface in which you're able to look at the same piece of infrastructure, mutate it, like Whitney just said, observe it, make a change to it, take it through your GitOps lifecycle, if that's what you want to do, and literally be on the same page. Like instead of joining a Zoom, you might just open up Meshery and you're both in there. Both of your mice are flying around. You can both see what's going on. It's hard to argue over. It might be that you're finger pointing over the fact that like there's no disagreement that the CPU is being consumed, but there is a disagreement over whether or not the CPU was limited or set to have a limit, and if that was configured properly or not, or if that limit is being forced correctly or not. Well, Meshery is capable of the full life cycle of these types of systems, even like the full life cycle of Prometheus as an example. And so it's capable of addressing maybe its configuration issue, maybe the container that is having a CPU spike, maybe it's configured improperly in terms of where its limit is set. Maybe your Prometheus server and its alert triggering rule is overly sensitive or needs to be tweaked. Maybe those are the problems. And like, so that involves a variety of folks to potentially point the finger at, or potentially blame, or potentially help, maybe more positively, like potentially help solve the problem. Meshery spans all of those things. Meshery is able to, bring you into one interface so that you can fix the triggering rule if that was the issue. Explore, like it integrates with Prometheus and shows you metrics and can help you look at it from that angle. So what you'll find from many of the other tools is that like Prometheus has one vector I know I'm answering this in complete fullness. Like Prometheus has one vector from which to look at things. Datadog, a few more vectors. Meshery, even more, like all-inclusive and immersive. Like you hopefully find yourself bringing up Meshery along with your teammates or your colleagues in the other teams, and you'd be there's a real-time collaborative experience that Meshery is facilitating. So whereas you wouldn't do that with Datadog, you'd pull up Zoom and you'd say, you guys see what I'm seeing in the dashboard? What dashboard? Okay, let me share my screen in Zoom. Meshery cuts through that.
Cool. So I have most of the definition, and we want to make sure that you approve. Meshery is a self-service extensible engineering platform. It's management software. So it's a control plane for control planes with collaborative interface for viewing and manipulating a large number of underlying systems.
Yeah.
A large number of underlying systems. Yeah. Cloud systems. Cloud native systems? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's hard to. That's a great. I struggle with this because, yeah, maybe the most concise way is like cloud and cloud native systems, or like public clouds and Kubernetes. Just as we go to fill in some of that, at the moment, the way that Meshery models the world, so to speak, or models the infrastructure under management, it currently does so in a very Kubernetes-centric way. It's within the project scope to greatly expand that. Meshery's, well, it says right there, it's highly extensible, and we'll give examples of its extensibility.
My first impression of this, the idea of this, it's actually kind of polarizing. One part is like, yes, this makes so much sense. This is a lot to navigate. It's great to have like a single place to communicate about the problems and to solve problems and to integrate projects, if that's even part of it. Awesome. But then my part of me, the devil side, is just like, this seems like so much work to set up and to manage access to who gets access to what, that it also sounds like, I suppose, because it's solving the complexity of a complex system, inherently it's probably going to be a little bit complex to get started in the first place.
That's not unsubstantiated. Like Meshery has a number of unique concepts. Meshery is almost 5 years old. Yesterday, some of its maintainers, we're gonna have a birthday party soon. Yesterday, Meshery was presented for moving to the incubation level of project maturity within the CNCF. And so currently, Meshery is a sandbox level project. It's like, I don't know if it's 4.5 or like coming right up on 5 years old. So it's trying to do a lot, and it does do a lot. And it does have a number of adopters who have used Meshery, some of Meshery's functionality, its earlier functionality, clearly, like for quite some long time. And as we continue to build, it's a piece of management software, so it can have various feature themes like performance management or configuration management or lifecycle management. And it's the 10th fastest growing project in the CNCF, which is super impressive considering it's a sandbox project and there's 200 something other projects in the CNCF. So the way that it helps bring together this collaborative experience is, and you're probably through, well, I guess a little over 300 integrations that it has right now.
Okay.
You're right that like it's a lot for Meshery as a tool to keep up with. Like, how can it? First of all, like 300 and what integrate? So how many people does it take to, first of all, create those integrations, and then second of all, to like sustain them, maintain, like on an ongoing basis? How do you make sure that, like, as if Meshery is managing Prometheus, like we were just mentioning, and a new version of Prometheus comes out, how do you maintain all those integrate? Well,
yeah.
Maybe I'll leave a cliffhanger there and we can get back to it.
So does Meshery help different, if you're using different CNCF tools, does it help you integrate those tools with one another?
Yeah, that's right. That point doesn't get highlighted necessarily very often. Maybe yes is the concise answer.
Okay. Viewing, manipulating, and integrating. I think this is a big.
Yeah, Alex. expand on that a little bit to say, well, there's a bunch of ways in which that can be particularly useful.
Yeah.
One of them is a simple, it says,
Before you go, I want to capture, we're talking about a lot of cool stuff, and because we're kind of hopping all over the place, I am losing an overall picture. So should we like dig in on integrations? We also have a ton of questions, which thank you everyone for your questions. What would be a good way to move forward in a structured way instead of a deliberately structured way?
Yeah. That might make a lot of sense to talk about the integrations and sort of the way that Meshery models those. Like, how does it actually understand the particulars of each of those different projects, whether it's a CNCF project or just whatever infrastructure that it's modeling.
So up top with the idea of Meshery integrations, I have one confusing point before we dig in on any of it. And when we say Meshery integrations, I can take that two ways. I could take it as integrates tools that integrate with Meshery, or tools that Meshery helps to integrate with each other. And when we say Meshery integrations, which one do we mean? Or both?
Probably the latter.
Okay.
If I got it right, that like much of the onus of like how that integration is written and performed is performed by Meshery as a project. And I think that was the second way that you were describing is like, if I got it right.
So there are over 300 cloud things. There are like 300 projects or cloud related systems that integrate with Meshery, and that Meshery helps integrate with each other. Something like that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess I get what the more of the direction of the. Yeah. Oh man. Wow. Yeah. We've never like done the combinatorial math of like what it would mean to quantify. If Meshery helps other systems integrate with each other, does that count as integration? And like, what would that? So the count that we're talking about here doesn't include the vast permutations that would occur based on its facilitation of like other projects integrating with other projects and that kind of a thing. Rather, the 320 and for those for those out there that have a web browser in front of them, if they were to visit meshery.io, fairly prominently on the website is a list of those integrations. And one of the things that people will notice is that like maybe there's a particular technology like FluentD, just as a random example, that maybe you'll see that logo more than once. And then you start thinking, well, wait a second, like that doesn't, hold on, that's a duplicate. How is that being counted as another integration? It's like, well, there are, at the moment, Meshery doesn't, so Meshery integrates with FluentD in a few different ways. It models FluentD's and FluentBit's capability in a couple of different ways. And so each way that it models it is just checkmarked as an integration, or we count it as one. That kind of gets us into maybe, yeah, go ahead.
And integrates then means what exactly? So it's not just a matter, I think maybe if we define what integrates means, then that might help like clear up the understanding.
It means that if Meshery integrates with a particular piece of infrastructure or a project, that it is capable of modeling all of the characteristics, all of the ways in which you can configure that piece of infrastructure. So Meshery doesn't integrate with VMs and VMware and stuff. I just tend to think of it a little bit as I think of Whitney in our discussion, but to maybe use a container as an example, you can, in Kubernetes, you pods are the atomic unit of compute, so to speak. And in a pod, you might have one or more containers. Meshery digests Kubernetes APIs. And those APIs are highly granular, very specific about what a pod is and what all of the various ways you can configure a pod. So there are, so Kubernetes has resources, these API resources, and it has standard resources that ship with Kubernetes distribution. And in the same way, it is very extensible. These other integrations that Meshery has, they a lot of them will create their own custom resource definitions so that they can integrate sort of first class with Kubernetes. Meshery digests the world's Kubernetes custom resource definitions, wraps metadata around them, and is then able to understand how to configure Prometheus, or like if that's the example. Now, Prometheus you might see listed multiple times in the set of integrations. Let me step back and pause and say, like, so integration means, that Meshery has a model and a series of components individualized. So in Prometheus, you might have, alert rules, or you might have, what else? Like PromQL queries that you've defined, whatever resources that Prometheus as a project has fathomed and created and defined, if they have expressed those in a Kubernetes native format, in a custom resource format, Meshery readily digests that and comprehends it. And then as it goes to help you collaboratively manage that infrastructure, if Meshery has a model for it, then its level of granularity for articulating the configuration of Prometheus and ultimately for like viewing a live running Prometheus and understanding how healthy that Prometheus is, or maybe making changes to that Prometheus like you'd mentioned before. Meshery can do so up to the degree that Prometheus itself as a project has published its APIs, has published specifics about how to configure it, how to monitor it. There's an
I think I would like to repeat what I've written down, what I've gleaned from what you've taught me so far, understands. And then I think I understand that Meshery integrates with like underlying like cloud provider stuff too. But because this is such a complicated topic, it might be nice just to scope it to the CNCF projects so that we could be a little more clear and not have to say cloud and cloud native. And so maybe we'll scope it for clarity to just how it integrates CNCF projects with itself and with one another. And then what I'm hearing is there are like over 300 cloud and cloud native tools that integrate with Meshery, which now I'm reading that isn't quite right. There are 300 integrations, which would have a smaller number of tools, right?
Oh, yeah, right. You're right. If some of them are, right. If you were to say, well, let's just count these three integrations with Fluent D and Fluent Bit as one thing, then you can, I'm not sure what it would, I don't know if it would cut in half, or I don't know if it would it'd be 75% less, or I mean, not 75, but like 25% less or 50% less. I'm not sure.
Okay. We're going to say roughly 150.
Sure.
Cloud and cloud native tools that integrate with Meshery. There are 170 something projects in the CNCF. And integrates means that Meshery is capable of modeling all the ways that a user can manipulate that thing. So an integration doesn't just mean like integrations and projects are not one-to-one. There are integrations for each custom resource that a project adds to a Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. There's
No,
wait.
each can.
Say it one more time.
Well, I think the important piece is that integration, it's not like Linkerd is an integration. There are lots of different ways a user can use Linkerd, and each of those ways is its own Meshery integration.
Yep.
Is the real takeaway from that? Is that Meshery might manipulate or integrate with a thing in multiple ways, and you use Prometheus alert rules as one integration, and Prometheus PromQL queries being another integration. And then you said Meshery reads and understands a CNCF project's custom resources. That's where it's hooking in.
Nice. Yeah.
Awesome. And then do you feel like there's any main points about integration that we need to add to this that I didn't capture here?
Yeah, part of it goes back to what you were asking earlier about Meshery integrating with projects and Meshery helping facilitate projects integrating with one, like relating to one another. Meshery.
I like what you.
Yeah, it is about relationships actually, and so the relationships is a concept in Meshery. It's one of the areas that delights people who use Meshery is that it has, well, it's aware of the fact that one aspect of Prometheus maybe it relates to an aspect of another piece of infrastructure. Maybe it's a remote storage system where it's writing out metrics, or maybe it's a container that it's monitoring, it's scraping metrics from. So Prometheus has relationships with infrastructure that it's monitoring. So it's going out and asking for metrics or collecting metrics, or it's being pushed metrics from other from projects that it's infrastructure that it's monitoring. At some point, it gets lots and lots of metrics. Maybe it wants to write out those metrics to a remote storage location. At some point, you might be running like Thanos or Cortex, two other CNCF projects, to help store and persist all of those metrics in a multi-tenant, sort of highly resilient way. And so those all have relationships with one another, and comprehending that and understanding how quickly Meshery or Prometheus is scraping or being pushed to these metrics and where it's storing. These are relationships that Meshery helps model and that are being built into Meshery's model.
So is there like a Meshery custom resource called a relationship?
Yeah.
There is? Cool.
Yeah. And it's, there's a whole, it's the relationship. I so desperately want to share slides right now.
That's part of the fun of this format.
Yeah, precisely. When you have a Meshery model, the model is importable and exportable. So Meshery is extensible. I'll just keep saying that. You can take those models with you. Maybe you have your own custom resources that Meshery doesn't model just yet. You're like highly encouraged to have Meshery model that for you. There are Meshery CLI commands for doing just that, to be able to import and export those models. Meshery, when it exports a model, it exports it as an OCI image, as a container image. Inside of that model, this package is of all these descriptors for, maybe we should choose something other than Prometheus to just give an example of, like.
Well, do you want me to draw a diagram right now? Do you think maybe you're kind of describing?
Sure. Yeah. There's
I have a question too. In chat, I see your awesome chat, and I appreciate you. And I'm sorry I haven't felt like we could veer off yet to get to your questions and comments. But maybe this will go together. I'm wondering if let's just say I want to make a development environment where I want to run my application, I want to be able to use Knative, I want to integrate with a Google Cloud database, and I want Prometheus. I want to be able to see my metrics, scrape and store metrics. Do I define that with Meshery resources, or do I make it and then I pull in Meshery?
Either way.
Either way.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, don't you love that kind of an answer? Like, the reality is that that's true. That like, hey, sometimes people use the terms like greenfield and brownfield to refer to exactly what you just. And it's, yep, Meshery has this a very core concept to Meshery that I can't believe I didn't mention before, but it is a design. There's a custom resource in Meshery called a design, and it is like a Google Doc, if you will, or like a Google slide. Inside of a design, if you opened up a Google Doc or a Google slide is probably a better example, you can draw things. You could put in a circle, a square, a triangle, and you can draw lines between them. And like you can, I'm telling your audience how Google Slides works. So I don't just.
You're painting a picture.
And if a slide is a Meshery design, so you can have a Meshery design. You can say, well, of the infrastructure that Meshery models, if there's Knative as a model, in Knative, there's a few components to Knative that Knative has as these custom resources.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with what all of those are, but there's more than one. And you're able to design, then you're able to include in that design each of the things that you just mentioned, the GKE or the GCP database service, the Knative system, shoot, I forget all the things that you'd said, but to the let me say this, part of like one of the things that I work on in Meshery is Meshery proper. I also work on Meshery extensions. And one of the extensions, and my mind always goes there, is this. It's an extension that's a visualization of a design. So it's a canvas. And so I sort of think of that as I'm describing it. You, outside of Meshery, importing and exporting these models and helping model your infrastructure, once you have all those models inside of a Meshery system, which it ships by default with, well, then it's time to either start creating a design from scratch. And great, start modeling it out and drawing it and diagramming, and hopefully Meshery delights you with the fact that it understands the relationships between these components. Alternatively, no, I already have that infrastructure. Can Meshery comprehend and discover that? And like, yep, there's a component of Meshery that's, it's a Kubernetes operator. So anytime you connect Meshery to a Kubernetes cluster, it deploys an operator. That operator analyzes the Kubernetes cluster and starts informing Meshery server of all the resources that Kubernetes environment has. So Meshery can then digest and model your currently running infrastructure. If you connect Meshery to multiple clusters, then it deploys one operator per cluster. And so the operators synchronize the running state of your Kubernetes clusters into one place, and you're able to then, look, visualize that environment, look over it, and do some observability things. You're able to, through one of Meshery's extensions, you can open up like a terminal in your browser. So you can open a terminal to your pods if you want to, and manipulate them. So yeah, if you don't have to start your designs from scratch, as a matter of fact, not only could you start them from having Meshery discover your infrastructure, and not only could you start them from scratch, you could also just connect, you can have Meshery import your Kubernetes manifests or your Helm charts or your Docker Compose files, and maybe that list will grow. But you can import your infrastructure as code definitions, that you can import those files, and Meshery will automatically convert those into a Meshery design. And so
I'm building my mental model slowly but surely. What I'm understanding, a design is a high-level abstraction that references one or many model abstractions, which I haven't written on the board yet. But each model abstraction references one component. Is component an abstraction? So
it is.
like okay, so an app, a model would do an app, like a model would define your application. A model would define your Google Cloud SQL database. A model would define Knative. A model would define Prometheus.
That's pretty. That's pretty highly accurate. There's and exactly what you were just saying is that when you're like, if there's a model that defines the GCP SQL, like GCP SQL, there's probably a few aspects of GCP SQL that you're concerned with, like how many database instances do you have? Are they in multiple regions, or like there's a number of, so as we draw out this picture of what Meshery's internal logical structure and the way that it characterizes the world is, it's sort of a more or less a one-to-one relationship of a model to a type of infrastructure, maybe GCP SQL. And then each model has X number of components, Meshery components. These Meshery components are more or less a one-to-one relationship with a Kubernetes resource, a standard resource or a custom resource. GCP, in our example, that's not Kubernetes. What do you mean? Well, GCP.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but no.
A different one.
Oh, no. I'm glad that we called that one out because Meshery does integrate with GCP, and it does integrate with AWS, and it has roadmap to do the same thing for Azure. GCP, or the folks at Google and the folks at these public clouds, have said, hey, Kubernetes is a thing. And sometimes people want to use that same sort of Kubernetes style tooling to interact with other existing services like GCP SQL. I'm a total ignoramus on GCP SQL, by the way, so I don't. Yeah. But so Google and AWS and these folks they will publish custom resources and operators, Kubernetes operators, for programmatically interfacing with and managing and configuring other non-native Kubernetes services. Because they do that, because they publish definitions of like how to interact with GCP SQL in a Kubernetes native way, Meshery is able to pick that up and model non-Kubernetes services. Yeah.
So we have the design. The design contains models. The models contain components, and the components are different ways. Like you pulled these based on publicly available information, and they're related to real GCP SQL resources, like a database server and a database resource. Knative might have like a Knative service component, and it might have a revision component. I believe those are two custom resources in Knative. And then the relationships are custom resources too.
Yeah.
So it's like, so is each relationship, like Prometheus has a relationship with the app saying that it's allowed to scrape the app, and it has a relationship with another relationship with Knative saying it's allowed to interact with Knative in this way.
Whitney, you've hit it out of the park, man. Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like,
And so each one of these is its own. If we're drawing boxes around custom resources, each one of these is its own relationship custom resource.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's exactly like, yeah, if you were to open up that design
Mm-hmm.
and look at the YAML, and it's all YAML under the covers for like all of the, it's like part of what Meshery is providing this, this way of, like we said before, like it's a way of visualizing and understanding what's going on without having to stare at like 10,000 lines of YAML. But under the covers, if you want to get to the YAML, sure, it's right there. You can flip literally in the UI of Meshery, click on the design and it'll flip around and show you all the YAML. You can YAML your heart away. And so, but when you do look at like what comprises a design, it's precisely what you said. It's a set of components and it's a set of relationships between those components. And there's a few other things inside the design, but those are that's the meat of it. I mean, that's the.
And I have a couple of questions still. I was gonna service revision. And then these are components. Okay, so I have probably an inference that I want to check. Like, probably Knative has a lot of possible components, a lot of possible custom resources, but I probably only need to define and reference the ones I want to use, right? I'm not dealing with all of them. Okay, and then another one is part of this diagram is a homegrown app. So it's not any of these integration things. Can I add my homegrown app and my home and relationships to and from it as a model? Would I define it as a model?
Yes, and also you can do that. You might also find though that like, oh, well, the existing standard Kubernetes resources, like just the regular deployment, Kubernetes deployment, Kubernetes service, Kubernetes, that, oh, for my app, that was enough. Like I did, but you might also find like, oh, no, actually my app has, the other part of that answer is true too. If you want to.
Yeah. So the answer is your app is probably, besides your running application, it's probably associated with some policy. It's probably associated with some, or there are probably one app would likely not be one model. There'd probably be several models, each representing a different aspect of an application. Might be a more accurate if we're splitting hairs. Okay.
And it might, right. It's kind of earlier when we were talking about, oh, hey, is it 320 or 150 or what? It's sort of like, it's a lot, or like, like you can count it how you want to count it, kind of.
Basically, each of these components are being counted as an integration.
Each of them in the term 320, it's each of the models.
Each of the models is an integration. Okay.
So like GCP SQL is an integration, and then of GCP SQL, it's got a database instance and a database region, and I have no idea what else. And each of those, if they are their own individual resources, then those are components within the model. The model is like a unit of packaging for telling Meshery, informing Meshery of how to comprehend and characterize, a piece of infrastructure. So just like models are extensible, or that you can define your own and import them, and in the same way, so too are designs. So if you invest into creating a design and you're like, well, yeah, Meshery was great, but I don't want to use it anymore. Or Meshery is great and I like using it for designing things, but we have our own GitOps like investment for the last couple of into whatever tooling we're using there. And while Meshery is capable of deploying your designs, it'll talk to X number of clusters and deploy your design and work with Kubernetes to make sure that actually happened and let you know if it didn't and why. Maybe still you just don't want it for that piece. So a design is importable and exportable as well. And Meshery as a project has a few different GitHub actions so that you can, maybe we'll come back to this after.
Yes, please. Will you define a model for me again? Because I want to capture it on the board.
Yeah. It's a unit of packaging of Meshery's components. So it helps, it characterizes, helps Meshery, it extends Meshery to help characterize and understand how to configure, and I'm trying not to use the word model.
I liked how to configure.
Yeah.
How to connect to and configure, probably.
Yeah, and yep, connect to, configure, characterize so models all the details that a given component has, like Knative revision and the fact that it has particulars around, I don't know what it, the Knative service, and it has particulars around where its port is exposed and what type of protocol is being used, and if it's secure and is an SSL cert, and like all the like there's like a ton of things that you might configure about your Knative service that would be characterized inside of this component. And in your model that's modeling Knative and all the ways that Knative works is like, well, there might be a bunch of different components inside that model. And you might also have a number of different relationships that define how it is that a service can relate to a revision, or it can't, like a Knative service can relate to or duplicates a Kubernetes service, or it doesn't, or but that would be codified inside of the model.
Okay.
And yeah.
So a model tells Meshery how to connect to and configure a cloud or cloud native tool or service. It references one or many components and relationships or relationships.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why does it sound so simple when you say it?
I have a lot of practice getting it. Great. And so now we'll we have relationship defined here, and we just need to define what a component is, and then we'll have written it all out. I used rather a lot with this illustration. We can, if we have a lot more text we're going to put up, we can take down the illustration. But in the short term, I just needed to draw it to understand it. And then also, so after,
yeah, I have to harp on that point. Like some of Meshery's extensions visualize your do this visualization. Like what you just said is precisely part of the it's like, I don't, this YAML and this, like, I don't, and even if I do, maybe I'm working with a counterpart who has no clue, or maybe I think if my mental model is different than yours, like, let's get on the same page about this. Yeah. And it's like, until you, so this is like one of the precise challenge that those visualization extensions, one of them just has whiteboarding capability, just diagramming capability. You might.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's one of the cool things about Meshery's models is like maybe the models and the components are precise or prescriptively descriptive of infrastructure, a Knative service specifically. And here's how, and by the way, Knative 1.0 versus Knative 2.0, Meshery tracks all that. But you might also just want to be able to draw a circle, or maybe there's something in your environment where that's unique to your environment that, yeah, you're able to create your own components. And sometimes those components, you're like, look, Meshery, this is just a circle. Like, I don't want you to provision the thing. Like, don't, just, and so you're able to flag in any of these components as just annotations. Like, this is the way that my mental model.
Hey, Meshery. Oh, nice.
Yeah. And
so you could be like, yeah, I need this in my mind to be connected to this other thing, even though, like, engineering wise, programmatically, it doesn't need to actually be connected. Yeah. Interesting. That's cool that's captured as part of the Meshery process. I like that. And then relationship. Oh, wait. Model also references relationship. So what I want to do, if it's okay with you, is I would like to define components so we have written out all the custom resources. And then I would like to finally acknowledge and appreciate everyone in chat that we've neglected a little bit, because this is complicated and that I needed my whole brain for it. So does that sound good to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is great.
Okay. So what is a component? How would you define a component, even though we kind of understand what it is?
It's a one-to-one mapping of a Kubernetes resource, or
A one-to-one mapping of the of. Oh, that wouldn't. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
No,
It's
no,
of
no.
a Kubernetes custom resource of a
Yeah,
Kubernetes. Okay.
or like a
Okay. Got it.
Kubernetes pod. If we were to
Okay.
that there
Got
is
it.
a Meshery component called pod or called Kubernetes pod, and it directly represents the concept of Kubernetes. And yeah, there's this experience that yeah. Anyway, let me pause.
Do you so like a GCP thing isn't a custom resource? Are you using like Crossplane or something under the hood to be able to define?
No, no, we've thanks to Fabio Passetti, we've spent some time with helping ingest Crossplane's models.
Mm-hmm.
Ask your question again. So Meshery does all of this stuff completely independent of Crossplane as a project, or I think
Okay.
I haven't spent much time with Crossplane, but
Okay.
um,
It's not dissimilar. It's yeah. But so components a one-to-one mapping of a Kubernetes resource or custom resource. And so have you then for cloud things, you've made these into Kubernetes resources. You made Kubernetes reference cloud,
yeah, or the nice,
external cloud stuff. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
cool. I just wanted to clear that up. And that's what Crossplane does too, which Crossplane was also mentioned in the chat, which I'm finally going to talk to. Hello, friends. If you probably have left because I wasn't paying attention. But Mohammed, you had a question about Tanzu, which makes sense because I'm a Tanzu advocate. But that's not the subject of today's conversation. So please feel free to DM me with that question, and I'll find the people who can answer it for you if it's not me. This is an I love Meshery, a love letter to Meshery. I love Meshery because it's a disruptive, brand new, I like disruptive things, brand new collaborative interface to manage complex infrastructures using Kubernetes as the right hand of God. I like all those descriptors, disruptive, but it's not brand new. You just said it's 5 years old, right? That's old in Kubernetes land.
Here's the thing: is like, well, for my part, I've done a piss poor job of like telling people about it. Like, this is a great.
New to me and therefore new. That's how I roll. Meshery can visualize the entire infrastructure and enable the teams to interact in a completely different way through diagrams. You know, I like that, as this is the format of that show. I'm very enthusiastic to see you integrate custom CRDs. We can now manage the entire infrastructure in a GraphOps way. GraphOps.
He just
That's
coined.
fun.
He just coined that, didn't he?
I think so. When you use it later in your marketing material, you need to give him a shout out, Fabio. And then Fabio said maybe it can be used alongside Crossplane, which is cool.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about Crossplane, I think Crossplane might call itself a control plane for control planes. Oops.
It might. Yeah, like the universal control plane is. Yep.
It's what Meshery calls itself, the universal control plane.
Oh no. I think that Crossplane maybe said that at one point, but
okay.
Yeah. We're sticking with management plane. It is the
best thing about Meshery is the community aspect. So many amazing contributors ready to help you anytime. That's so nice. That's awesome. Fahim's going to watch this later. And then another love letter to the community, which is talented contributors. I imagine, actually, that's a good point. Like, to be able to pull off this many integrations, I imagine you do need a really healthy and vibrant community for this project to work. So good job, everyone.
Oh yeah,
it's not an easy thing to grow. So your job these 5 years may have been just that piece of it, and that's respectable.
It is. Well, there's a lot of reward in supporting others, and a lot of learnings from it too. A lot of sort of selfish learnings that come from it. And so, and with the thing about what those individuals were just saying, and about what you're saying as well, is you didn't say, you said, "Good job, everybody," and that's that's exactly it. Is that like it's kind of what would you say? It's what do you say when you
Collaborative?
yeah, or when you catch a disease from someone else, it's contagious.
Contagious. Okay.
There's this disease in the community that's contagious. It's like, yeah, somebody receives help and they turn around and offer help to somebody else. So
The Meshery logo is kind of circular, right? You just sneeze and a bunch of Meshery logos
great.
spittle everywhere. It's a green color too.
I don't know, with the green on the whiteboard, like we're really the green.
Oh, this is wonderful. So finally, after an hour, I think I have a really nice mental model of what Meshery is. And if anyone who's watching alongside doesn't, please ask any clarifying questions now or whenever you see this. You could always comment on the video. And so now that we kind of know what it is, where's a good place to take it next?
Oh yeah, there's a couple of topics on designs and a catalog of designs.
Okay.
We might want to talk
Catalog.
about sort of yeah. So designs. We started to, one way in which we described a design is like, I had said, well, kind of like a Google Doc or kind of like a Google Slide, where, yeah, you capture all of those components inside of it. That designs have a life cycle in Meshery. They can start from a Kubernetes manifest, start from a Helm chart, they can, Meshery can read from your live running infrastructure to recreate those designs.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like a review process that you can do with design. So you can, since it's collaborative, and just like a Google Doc, you can go in and add comments and open comments and tag others. And so, yeah, there's a lot of parallels, I would say, between like a Google Doc and a design. Eventually you end up with a number of designs. Meshery has a catalog to host those. It also has a concept of workspaces, like a Google Drive. You have a Google Drive and you put a bunch of docs in it. Well, Meshery has a workspace and you can put a bunch of designs in it.
So I think we're talking about designs a little bit, but we're also more talking about almost how to collaborate within, how Meshery enables collaboration.
Yeah,
I think, yeah. So
yeah.
And then that also brings it around to what seems a little overwhelming about Meshery in the first place, ATION. So, and that is the making sure the right people have access to the right things, which is actually a big problem, period, regardless of whether you have a Meshery layer on top. And so how Meshery enables collaboration. There's like these awesome ways that you're talking about how you can comment on designs, and then you said a workspace.
Yeah, a workspace is like a Google Drive, or there's a lot of parallels. And a design is like a Google Doc. Just a lot of parallels.
Okay. Multiple designs can be organized together in a workspace.
Yeah. And that's in part, a workspace is one of those areas where you can control access. Mm-hmm. So, maybe I'll say a couple of words about permissions and access and users and teams and workspaces, if that makes sense.
Access control can happen at both of these levels, at the design level and the workspace level. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, just like a Google Doc, you might share your Google Doc with someone in a different org, or maybe that person already has access to your Google Drive, so they can already access your doc. In the same way, workspaces and designs, the access to them, you can individually share a design, or you can share your workspace with your team, and they'll have access. So.
Cool. And so I'm running out of space, but I'm kind of down to delete some of this, or maybe just a component, or I guess I want to have, also I'm totally down to continue having the conversation without me writing stuff down.
Oh.
That's definitely an option too. But I guess I want to know what do you think is important to capture on the board, and should I erase a little bit of things to get it there?
There's like whole other entire functions like performance management and how Meshery has load generators. Like that said, I'm not sure the appetite of everybody on the audience to like go through 8 more hours.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
we might be able to squeeze it in here. Some of the important concepts about the catalog actually we might be able to fill it in between your
I have all this space down
diagram.
here.
Yeah. We might let's see if it could.
So you want to talk about a catalog or performance management, or both?
The catalog. Maybe we just won't even get to maybe we won't even get to performance management. You know, there's some nerdy stuff to talk about actually, and there are some pretty neat things. But
okay, let's do catalog here and performance management. A couple big points down here.
Okay.
So is the catalog a way to share designs?
It's one of the ways. Yep. It is a so. Wow,
is it a custom resource?
It is
more like an artifact hub.
It is like an artifact hub. It is, yeah. That's a great way of. It is a custom resource. Like Meshery as a project is a schema-driven project, or which is to say, like if you open up Meshery's code and you say, "Is there a concept called catalog?" Yeah, and okay, and it's well articulated in terms of schema, in terms of. But if people were to visit meshery.io/catalog, they would see there's about a couple hundred public-facing designs that various people have created and have said, I would like to share this with the world. And so, yeah, the Meshery catalog is very much sort of aligned with what you would find in an artifact hub, or like that you can. So just like Docker Hub or other hubs that we're aware of, and Artifact Hub too, that some content in there is maybe extremely well supported and is official and stamped and approved, and some of it is it's just a side project from someone, and maybe they'll help you if you run into trouble, maybe not. And so, yeah, inside the catalog, as people go to publish a design, when someone chooses to publish a design to the public-facing catalog, there's an email is generated to the project maintainers, and there to do a review and vetting, and then great, and then help get it qualified and published. That doesn't mean that you can't. That maybe you have a design and you're like, well, I don't want to publish this to the catalog. Like, it's not one of those, but I do want to share it with others. Great. There's a difference between, you can have a design be private so that only you're aware of it. You can have a design be public so that sort of like it, so that anybody that knows it's sort of like an unlisted on a YouTube video, or like it's public and it's accessible. If you know the URL, or if you give people the URL, they'll get to it. And then there's published to where, oh yeah, if you go to the YouTube channel, you're going to see the video in the list, and it's published in that sense.
Uh-huh.
So private, public, and published are the various visibility levels of a design.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think it's fine-grained enough. I'm not going to put it on the board, but a catalog is a Meshery custom resource that's a repository. It represents a repository for designs.
Yeah.
And so there's a public category, catalog, excuse me, where you can use designs that
Yeah.
aren't necessarily, some are verified and some are not.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've begun to work with a number of the CNCF projects and the maintainers of those to have them come over and publish designs that represent
Cool.
like deployment best practices or configuration best practices of their projects, so that people don't have to start a design from scratch. They can start from like a verified design coming from the Knative group or coming from another project. So in the same way, so we were just meeting with the Dapper, presenting at the Dapper community, and they've spent a lot of time with us. That email then, or those folks are put in control of that vetting and approval process for designs that are marked as Dapper specific, or because in a design, maybe it's primarily focused on Dapper, but maybe it has GCP, SQL, and Knative, and Prom, and App, and so Meshery is obviously aware of what technologies are characterized inside of a design, but you as the person who wrote the design might say, well, yeah, I know it has all that other stuff, but really it's about Dapper. And so you can help the catalog, help put your content into the catalog where you think it fits best.
I have a question. When a CNCF project submits a design, has a design, so it's showing you, here's how you can use our project in Meshery. Here's a design to make it easy for you. Does a CNCF project also committed to maintaining that design? Because if so, that's kind of a big deal. That's awesome.
I'll say it like this. So we've been in discussion with CNCF staff for quite some long time, or we've been meeting and iterating toward. We're recording this. toward
I'll be asking you about this later after the stream.
Toward trying to help. So like the playground that we talked about with Meshery's playground that has all the projects inside of it and really greases the wheels of adoption and people playing around, that's a super great resource for all of the other projects who don't have to necessarily want to maintain their own playground. And it's also a centralized playground in which maybe it's not just about testing out Prometheus, it's about testing out Prometheus plus Thanos, or maybe comparing Prometheus and Thanos to Prometheus and Cortex. This is a playground. Well, we'll go back to your analogy. This is a playground of playgrounds. To the extent that the CNCF might like to help sponsor that as a resource ongoing for all projects, and sponsor and help officiate what might be a reference architecture. So if you were to go to the catalog and see, oh, this is verified, or what does verified mean, and what level of support is that associated with? So folks have tossed around the term reference architecture quite a bit, and so a little bit of
nice. So at this time, so basically, my point is a lot it's easy and fun to build something in the first place, but then once it's made, as versions change, as your application changes, it could be a pain in the butt to keep it all maintained. And so if you are borrowing a design or starting with one of these designs, and then the design is also, there's some commitment that it's going to be maintained, then that's very appealing, because then you don't have to do it, and the project of someone else is taking ownership of that piece of it. And so you're saying there has been talk of that, nothing official, but there has been talk of that. which is cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
What's when people want to what problems are people experiencing that cause them to knock on your door and say, I'm ready now for something has to change. I'm willing to make some changes around here. I think Meshery might be the ticket.
yeah, sometimes it's well, I don't want to, like, sometimes it really is like, they'll come over and say, I've been spending so much time trying to explain this stuff to the, in some respects, it's like the application developers who didn't understand this virtualized networking in the first place. They think that I'm trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Like,
Yeah.
for them to be on the same page with me is a lifesaver. Is like, and now they know it's not me that's standing in the way. It was just our, misunderstanding or
Yeah.
That's certainly one. Sometimes it's just I don't know what so the CNCF just adopted 5 more projects last week, or I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but like, like really often. And so sometimes it's just learning. Sometimes it's like learning and experimentation of, like, imagine this, if you're going to, like, let's go back to the Kubernetes pod. If the pod itself, you can put a container inside or multiple, and there are various ways. Like, there's so much to a pod. There's so much in there. You can have sidecars. You can have init containers. You can have, and then there's other types of like pod-like things like cron jobs and jobs, and like, if you're going to sit down and try to learn any of that or go through, imagine if you go to a catalog of models and components and you can peruse it and browse it, and you open up a component and it says, yeah, it's a pod, and by the way, here's all of the things that you can configure about a pod. So many things you had no idea that I had no idea that were there. Well, it starts to change things around, like the way that it facilitates learning, and comprehension of like discovery of things you weren't even aware of, is one of the problems that we often find people coming to do. So there have been Meshery contributors come over and help create learning paths or tutorials that they're really not necessarily about Meshery. They're about a different one of the integrations that Meshery has, and then people end up, like, through that visual extension that canvas-based extension. Sometimes we find folks are using Meshery to go present, like train their teams, or go give a presentation at a KubeCon or what have you, and explain they use it as a learning tool and a teaching tool, both.
So Meshery is like big. It has a lot of components. It touches literally everything in the CNCF landscape. So sometimes with these really big projects, it can be kind of hard to like boil it down to like, what do you actually do with it? So I'm hearing it's good for learning and training, right? I'm hearing it's good for experimenting with functionality, experimenting with integrations. I'm hearing it's good for communication. I wrote graph ops on the board from our friend. But these are pretty, like, do people use it in production?
Yeah, it's a pretty serious, right? I realize with like the thing. Yeah, no, it's a pretty serious tool. Like, or like, hey, all of those things that it's capable of expressing, it can deploy and like help you understand drift of that configuration over time. The performance, so it can, if you wanted it to deploy at Knative, it can. So you describe how it is that you want Knative to configure, and it will work with Kubernetes to deploy Knative.
So you can declaratively define your whole system, really. Yeah. Your system and your integrations.
Yeah. You can.
So you're not limited to software, it's software and hardware. And you're not limited to components because it's also, okay.
You can imperatively interact with your infrastructure as well. If like I was using an example. If you want to start a live log streaming session, one of Meshery's extensions does that. It'll allow you to establish a stream of logs from the standard out of any of your one or more pods at the same time, or open up a terminal session with them. So sort of like it allows you in the GitOps sense, it allows you to be naughty if you need to. Like maybe there's something in production that's down and you need to go in and yeah, to the extent that it's facilitating collaboration, to the extent that, if you're in a Google slide, hey, I can tell if Whitney's in the same deck as me. Why? Because, well, her avatar is up there next to my avatar and her mouse is over there on that. Like it starts to change around the way that that significantly changes around the way that we work. We can do things in real time, helping change and get those slides done really fast. We can present in the next hour. And in the same way, imagine you're managing your infrastructure like that. That's, well, I don't know. Well, we'll see if it changes the game. It potentially does. There's as a framework, like one of the other feature areas that we were mentioning is this stuff around performance.
Yeah. And one quick question before we jump away from this, and is it mostly a UI based thing?
No, there's nope. Nope. A lot of the ways in which I articulate its value, it is. So Meshery as a project. This is one of the pieces of feedback we'd learned from earlier adopters, and that was, when Meshery started, Meshery ships today as a single container. There's a Golang based server. That server exposes extensible interfaces, a REST API and a GraphQL API. Inside that same container that Meshery as a project ships, that it releases, it's the Golang server and a UI for doing a lot of the stuff but not all of the things that we were just talking about. Great. That UI is a client of both the REST API and the GraphQL API. Great. There's a Meshery CLI or Meshery CTL, which performs many of the same things that you would do inside of the UI. So they're both the UI, the web-based UI and Meshery CTL are both just clients of Meshery servers APIs. And some things are more convenient to be done inside of the CLI and some things much more convenient to be done inside the UI.
Okay. I appreciate all of that. I followed some of it. My question right now is, as a user, what are my interface choices? How do I do what I want to do without understanding necessarily how it works?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Meshery CTL as on the command line and Meshery, well, we call it Meshery UI, which is its web-based interface.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interfaces. Excellent. Okay, I'm ready for performance now. Oh. I'm hearing so much about the graphical and the communication, and that really makes me think of UI and not so much CLI. But CLI, the way things are defined, I can see if you need to deploy something.
Yeah, there's a couple. Right.
I see both.
There's a couple
performance. Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, no. I was thinking like there's a couple of GitHub actions that the project has, and those GitHub actions will a lot of times take advantage of the CLI. So to your point,
okay.
Sometimes on performance, this is one of the earlier feature areas of Meshery. Meshery currently ships with, well, let me state hey, when you're running your infrastructure and you're configuring it, you can sometimes the way that you configure your infrastructure, the infrastructure and the applications that they run will be perform very well. Sometimes you configure them and they won't. Like trying to work through an understanding of which configuration is maybe the most optimal is in part the type of performance management that Meshery. So Meshery does performance characterization, or Meshery ships with 3 different types of load generators. So
Okay.
Meshery will let you define a performance test profile. Like it'll let you define, like this is one of the areas where you can get a lot of value out of Meshery, whether you run Meshery as an individual Docker container with no Kubernetes in sight, or you run Meshery with a bunch of clusters all around it. This particular performance characterization and the ability for Meshery to do generate load against a Kubernetes-based endpoint or just some random like HTTP interface somewhere else. You can tell Meshery to generate load for an hour or for 30 seconds, or like at this intensity or this volume or not. And so it'll run, it takes it, so it'll run those tests. And when it's done, it measures the throughput and the latency of how much traffic or how many requests Meshery was able to get through to your custom app, and how many in that time period and how quickly your app responds. And so it does statistical analysis over that particular test, and you can take that and it shows you the results. It graphs them out. Yes, visually if you're in the UI, but also if you're on the CLI, you can get back those tests. It'll just give you the P99, the P95. It'll give you the stats. The thing is then over time, you can run that same performance profile. You can run that same test any number of times, and Meshery will record those tests. And then if you're in the UI, you can pull up a graph and it'll show you what has changed in terms of those performance characteristics over time. And so, yeah, that's the gist of the.
So, like Meshery is excellent for experimenting with functionality, experimenting with integrations, and also experimenting with different configurations to provide optimum performance. Sometimes
people use this performance capability like as a gating factor of their releases. Like if they've written a custom application and they go to they go to merge a PR. Well, there's a Meshery GitHub action for invoking a this performance test against that current build, so that people can say, so that you might configure into your pipeline a gate, like, hey, the test passed with
oh, nice.
Or not.
I like that. Yeah. So the performance is part of the process to even get something, to even promote it to production, to make sure. That's cool. That's awesome. We filled a board.
Yeah. Hey,
look at us.
And it may or may not look like snot, green, yellow stuff.
I sneezed Meshery logos, and this is what we got. Is there? So to wrap this up, what I'm going to do is summarize everything you've taught me back to you. But before I do that, I like to say, those of y'all on chat, if you have any more questions, now's the time, or comments too. Lee, is there anything you would like to add before I do that? Before I summarize?
Don't let that playground resource go to waste, I guess. Like it's pretty.
Playgrounds. I couldn't let this one little bit of space. Meshery.io. That's the URL to our playground, and apparently the community is just wonderful, which I totally believe. And so, if someone does have questions and they want to, if someone wants to connect with this wonderful community that they've been hearing so much about, where do they go?
It's slack.meshery.io.
Slack.meshery.io.
Yeah, the Slack is too active, maybe.
That's the best problem. Okay, so our problem space before Meshery There's poor communication between teams. Basically, with cloud native and just cloud systems and microservices, our systems are growing wildly complex. They're unknowable by a single human. And so this causes problems, like it's hard to communicate between teams, or who knows what, who owns what, or who used to own what, that thing's acting up now, and where did it come from. um, there's there's no common understanding. People might blame each other, and on top of that already existing complexity, now if you want to add things, the CNCF landscape is vast and complex, and maybe you already have added CNCF tools and want to understand how they integrate. Maybe you want to explore different CNCF tooling, but that's overall a hard thing to navigate to, on top of the complexity of distributed systems and microservices. So it's a lot. It really is unknowable by any one person. So it's more about how do we manage all of this than it is about how to know it. So that's where Meshery comes into the picture. Meshery is a self-service extensible engineering platform. So we called it a control plane for control planes. But basically, it's management software with a collaborative interface. With it, you can view, manipulate, and possibly integrate a large number of underlying cloud and cloud native systems. So we talked about the whole CNCF landscape, but also we talked about VMs, we talked about cloud providers. So we're talking CNCF landscape like software, but we're also talking about hardware components too, are part of what Meshery can view and manipulate and integrate.
To the extent that those hardware components are described in a Kubernetes native way. Yeah.
Yes. I think it's even worth saying engineering platform for Kubernetes. Is that okay?
I think so.
On Kubernetes?
We have aspirations outside of Kubernetes, but
okay.
But I mean, that's an accurate description though of it currently.
Would you like to say on Kubernetes or for Kubernetes?
For Kubernetes, yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
It's done now.
Yeah, it's
for Kubernetes. Okay, so we started digging into what's it mean. What do Meshery integrations mean? Because I was asking, does it integrate with Meshery, or is it helping different things integrate with each other? And the answer is both. And so there are 150 or so, give or take 30% of that, of cloud native tools that integrate with Meshery. And so integrates means Meshery is capable of modeling all the ways that a user can manipulate that thing, which we'll get into later when we talk about the custom resources. So, and another point here is that Meshery might integrate with the same thing in multiple ways. So it might have, it integrates with Knative through a Knative service. It also integrates with Knative with a Knative revision. So those ways it integrates have to do with the tools themselves. Oh, the example we use here is like you might have Prometheus alert rules, and you might have Prometheus PromQL queries, and those are two different integrations with Prometheus. So, but in the end, Meshery reads and understands the CNCF project's custom resources. So it understands custom resources, and that's what it's using to integrate things with one another. So then we talked about the Meshery custom resources and how it works. So underlying it all, we have a design. So this box here represents design. And I'm going to write design. And so this is a high-level abstraction that references one or many models. And a design can either be something you design from scratch. It can be something that it can read what you already have and generate a design from what you have. And there's also communities make and share designs, or you can make and share designs privately, internally, or whatever. But designs are shareable. So the designs reference one or many models. The models really are what we're talking about when we're talking about these integrations. So the model will be like specifically say how to connect and configure a certain resource. So it might be Knative. We talked about maybe it's GCP. Maybe it's not even like Google Cloud Platform database. It's not even necessarily a CNCF tool. Your homegrown application or an aspect of your application that could be expressed in a model resource, Prometheus could be expressed in a model resource. And so that's a model resource. And the model will reference two different things. One are many components and one are many relationships. So then the components, if we drill into a model, represents different aspects of that piece of software. Or a Google Cloud SQL instance might have a database server model and an actual, component and a database component. A Knative might have a revision and a configuration. So the components within it are aspects of what that tool does, a custom resource from that tool. The component, as we just talked about, and then the relationships are also referenced in the model, and that's how the different tools can integrate with one another. You can say, a Prometheus, so you might have a model that says, this is related to Prometheus, and here's how Prometheus is allowed to scrape. It's allowed to scrape from these different applications and how often and when or whatever is configurable based on what Prometheus does. And so that's kind of how it works. You're declaratively defining different aspects of stuff and how they all work together. And then again, this Meshery is popular, and so CNCF projects might have supported public designs. So you're not necessarily writing all of this from scratch. You could either have it generated for you, or you can rely on other people's best practices and incorporate those into your design. So you're not doing, this would be an overwhelming thing to do from scratch, but there are a lot of ways you're helped along in this process when you're designing, when you're expressing your system in a Meshery way. So then we talked about how Meshery enables collaboration. So you talked a lot about Google Docs. So the way a Meshery design is, you can comment on designs the way you can comment on a Google Doc when you're collaborating on a document that you're writing. Multiple designs can be grouped together in a workspace. And then these are also different levels where you can have different access control. So so you could help define who has access to what, which seems like kind of an interesting problem to solve in this landscape, in this design. We talked about catalogs a little bit. We definitely said a Meshery custom resource is a catalog is an actual Meshery custom resource. There is a public catalog in the world where you can get push and pull different Meshery designs. To push them, they need to be some level of approved, I believe. There are different, you can know what's trusted and used more than others. And then we talked about how CNCF projects are beginning to support different designs, author and support different public designs that you're able to consume in this public way. But you can also use that catalog in your organization to maybe share designs within your organization, or so you can have, there are different levels of access to the catalogs that you create. We talked about performance. One problem with all this complexity, it's hard to know what configuration gives optimal performance. And so Meshery has a tool where it can generate load and analyze results. So you can try some configuration, generate load, see how that does, try different configurations, see if it's better, and you can experiment and then figure out what works best for your system. And then in conclusion, we talked about a lot of things Meshery is excellent for. So in a smaller way, like it's excellent for learning, experimentation with functionality, experimentation with integrations, experimentation with performance. It's good for communication because the interfaces, there's a CLI and a UI, but you have someone in our chat awesomely said GraphOps, where it's really, it's a great way to communicate what's happening in your system if you have diagrams that everyone can access and understand together. So it's good for communication. It is powerful and runs in production too. So even though we're talking about this in more of a collaborative or learning way, it also runs a production, and it's a way for you to declaratively define not only your system, but also your relationships, how everything relates to one another. And it facilitates collaboration. And in conclusion, don't just take our word for it. Go play at playground.meshery.io. How's that sound? Is there anything you would add or anything I didn't get quite right?
I'm going to rewatch this. I like, this is such a succinct summary. Like, I've got to rehearse this. This is great.
I'm happy you're happy. That means a lot to me, especially with I honestly don't get too nervous before shows anymore, but when it's something that I know is extra complex, I feel a little insecure, and I'm glad it's over and you're happy. So thanks so much for watching playground.meshery.io. And then what's the Slack workspace if you want to get plugged into this awesome community?
Yeah, please do. It's slack.meshery.io. Yeah,
Meshery.io. Thank you so much, Lee, for sharing your time and expertise.
I keep thinking about our snot board, I guess. But,
True. Thank you, everyone, for coming to watch. Thanks to those who watched the recording. We appreciate you. Bye.